Let's talk about governance matters, accountability and socio-economic issues addressed in the President's speech. I'm joined in studio by Khaya Sithole, a chartered accountant and analyst. So we are now heading to the polls in about 2 months' time. Are we ready?
Yes, I think the country is ready to go to the polls, but of course the question is, when we go to the polls, what is it that we're looking for as the electorate? And I suspect that what you've seen with this particular administration is that, of course, it had 4 very tough years when Jacob Zuma was at the helm of it. That ended at the beginning of last year, and now we've had the last 12 months of it being driven by a new captain of the ship. Now, of course, the big question is, by the time we get to May, will the ANC, the EFF and the DA and every other political party have been able to communicate and articulate their message to the electorate in a manner that makes them electable by the time we get to May? So, of course, everybody has started really planning how they're going to do it. The EFF has already launched its manifesto. The ANC has done the same. The DA will be doing so at the end of this month. So from now on, it's all systems go.
Right, let's look at what the captain was talking about yesterday. We know that we are a country that is grappling with unemployment. A large number of young people are unemployed. He spoke about entry-level requirements for work experience being scrapped. A tick or a question mark? How are we going to implement that?
It's an interesting one. So this is a project that was championed by the NYDA, in particular the ANC Youth League, and Ayanda Dlodlo pronounced on it last year. And the rule is that when it comes to government jobs at entry level, there'll be no experience requirement, which is useful, except of course the state is not supposed to be the primary employer. The key issue here is, can the state convince perhaps the private sector to sort of join up for a similar philosophy, which is to say, if we have so many young people who are unemployed and do not have any form of job exposure, perhaps it is an exclusionary mechanism to say to them that they should exhibit some form of experience in order for them to access those entry-level jobs. So he needs to be able to then articulate and sort of get the private sector to buy into that type of message so that it can make a dent in the unemployment. Now, if you're going to restrict that to just the public sector is not growing at any particular level, and if it was growing, there's no guarantee that it will be growing at the entry-level side. So I don't think it's going to have a fundamental impact on unemployment, but it does set the right tone, and we have a lot to thank the ANC Youth League and the NYDA for championing this cause over the past few years.
Sure. A key portfolio, health. The NHI bill apparently will be adopted and sent to Parliament soon.
2009 is when the NHI conversation started. 10 years later, it's still at the bill stage. And the big problem, of course, is that essentially everybody that you engage with when they talk about NHI, they simply say it is wonderful, it is a grand idea, except we cannot fund it. And even if we could fund it, we probably don't want to be funding it with the current state architecture driven by a government that quite simply has exhibited a complete inability to be able to run these things on a grand scale. Now, of course, the starting point would be, can you actually exhibit an ability to run a public health education system to begin with, and then thereafter scale it and make it a national health insurance scheme? Unfortunately, there's little evidence of Aaron Motsoaledi having the capacity or even, the expertise on how to fix the public healthcare system as it is and then roll out NHI. We are also waiting for the commission that was run by the Competition Commission into the healthcare industry. That again has taken years to be published. We still don't have the report. The former Chief Justice Sandile Ngcobo said it's coming towards the second part of this year. And of course, that's going to input, it's going to provide some insights into how we can actually run out the NHI. Do I expect it to happen within the next 2-3 years? Absolutely not.
The devil is in the detail here, isn't it, always? Let's take a look at education. As a country, when we speak about the 4th Industrial Revolution, do we understand what we are talking about?
I think some people do understand what the 4th Industrial Revolution is about. I just don't know if those people are the ones that are in Parliament currently. And one of the key issues, of course, is that if you're talking about shifting from one industrial revolution to another, there has to be the question of what happens to your citizens. Are your citizens equipped to sort of make that particular transition? And of course, in South Africa, we have this growing problem where the education system's outcomes quite simply do not mirror what the world of work looks like in the future. So what we've seen is that the world of work is changing at an exponential pace, but our education system tends to adapt at a more linear pace. Yeah. So of course, over time, you actually simply widen the gap between people's ability to migrate into the new workplace, as it were, and what that workplace is demanding. So when the president and politicians speak about the 4th Industrial Revolution, I always ask them, do we even understand what revolution we're in right now, and exactly what it is that the pitfalls or the things that we should watch out for before we speak about this particular transition? So I've taken the view that as soon as a politician starts talking about a 4th Industrial Revolution, information, you're better off listening to something else because they simply do not know what it is that they're talking about.
Sure. And of course, in line with that, the President talking about equipping schools with tablets so that e-learning can take place in the classroom. How important is it that we not only look at the pupils, but we also look at the teachers and preparing them to be able to deal with this technology?
Yeah, it's very important to sort of equip the teachers, but just on the learners themselves. The President said yesterday that the schools that will be prioritized are the schools that have been historically been left out of the loop. Now, when you talk about schools that have been left out of the loop, it's the rural schools in the Eastern Cape and KZN whose primary features are that they've got low access to electricity and low internet penetration. In fact, the Department of Basic Education, when it released its metric results last year, told us that internet penetration in the public school system within KZN is at 28%. Now, if you're going to have schools that don't have access to the types of resources that would make these tablets useful in the class, it becomes a very difficult one to understand what is the point of that. Now, obviously, some provinces are far more advanced in their ability to then say, we can roll out a digitalization program overnight. Perhaps Gauteng and the Western Cape are far more advanced in that conversation. So we need to then ask the President, well, you haven't even fixed the basic infrastructure requirements. In fact, his own Minister of Basic Education is in the Supreme Court of Appeal right now, challenging a judgment from the Bishop High Court that said you actually have to have the infrastructure rolled out, finalized at some point in time. We still don't have that problem sorted out. So for me, it's still a bit of a contradiction. Now, when you talk about the teachers, again, what seems to be the big problem in the South African landscape is that we do not do continuous learning on a regular basis for our teachers.
Sure.
So a lot of them simply say, actually, what we've seen over the past 10 to 20 years is that we keep stumbling from one, education regime to another. There was OBE at some point in time. You've got CAPS and you've got the NSC, and it looks like the government has always been confused about what it is that the education system ought to look like. So if you're now talking about the fourth industrial revolution, we're talking about rolling out these things. The first question is, do you have the individuals standing in front of those children who actually understand how to utilize those things and leverage them to get the best educational outcomes? And I've seen very little evidence of that.
Absolutely. Again, the devil in the detail. Thank you very much. Chartered accountant and analyst Khaya Sithole.